Hello all, Nightstale here, bringing you a knife review of this ZT-0223. This one has, if you hadn't noticed, been somewhat modified. Anode, the backspacer has been dyed, crazy purple, blurple backspacer, or yeah, standoff, I guess. This is the backspacer. And honestly, I've always really liked this knife. It's a design from a pretty prominent maker, Tim Gallion. He does some pretty expensive knives, if I remember correctly. And I really liked the look of this knife, but the plain version in just black and like brown G10 didn't do it for me. I saw this and I'm like, yeah, that makes it pop. That just takes it to the next level. I kind of want to get that. So I did. We've got coated blade. It feels like a PVD. I don't think it's a DLC. Yeah, it's got to be a PVD. I don't think it's a DLC. It doesn't feel like a DLC. 20 CV, titanium, flipper, and you do have this little tiny bit of opening right there at the bottom, which you can use to reverse flick. And despite it being low and not intuitive, the way the handles sort of bring you straight to it, it works better than you'd think. Let's get into specs real quick. Overall, I'm going to measure to the front of the handle here, even though I'll measure to the front of the handle and then give you the actual cutting edge length because it's a little different. Just a hair over 3.5 inches to the front of that handle, and about 3 3/4 inches to the actual termination of the blade. I mean, you're not going to use that part of the blade, but it is there. 5 1/8 inches overall, and 8 and just a hair over 5/8. Or overall, the handle was just over 5 inches, which is a little bit long for this blade or size, but it's sort of like because it's on an angle and it's stretched out, it's a little bit longer than you'd think. I suppose if you want to get technical, the ratios of blade to handle aren't perfect here, but it's all in service of this design, in my opinion, and I like the look of the knife. I do. And as I mentioned, it is discontinued, so it might be hard for me to link or anything like that. I think I mentioned it was discontinued. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I'm just rambling. That's what 90% of this is. My mind goes blank and I just talk about things. As you can see, this is a sizable knife. It's bigger than both the Elementum and the Conspirator. It is still full size, though it is approaching large. It definitely doesn't feel it. It's just so slim and narrow that it just... I gotta determine what this dimension is. When I say narrow, it always makes me think of this. And it's not an overly narrow knife. I'm just going to call it slim from now on when it's not tall. And of course, if you haven't seen this, you're not going to know what the hell I'm saying. Because I'm going to give absolutely no mention to that ever again, probably. 4.6 ounces, 6/8 ounces. Not an ounce an inch, but certainly not heavy, especially for a slightly larger than average knife as it falls out of my hands. T8. T8. Unfortunately, the pocket clip and these screws holding in the many screws holding in the backspacer inlay thing are all T6. That's a shame. I kind of wish they just put 2 T8s there. This knife has obviously been a part for the anodization process, so I didn't do it, but... So it works. It went back together. The screws are still quite functional. I'm not having trouble interacting with them, but as always, T8s are better, and your primary screws on this thing, the main things holding it together, are T8s. For some reason, the rest of it is not. And the clip, I don't actually mind on the clip because, I mean, it is reversible, but most people probably aren't ever going to mess with the clip. Yes. Really? You closed now? Okay, there we go. Thickness, 550 thousandths. So a little bit over half an inch. Not super thick, not super thin. 155 thousandths, I guess, on the blade stock. It's a little bit chunky on the blade stock. And it doesn't drop down to being as thin as like a slicey knife would, but it definitely is more of a harder use kind of sort of thing. In this case, it's about 19 to 20 thousandths behind the edge. That's a little thicker than I like seeing it, but again, this is clearly designed with a very tactical, combat-y vibe to it, and it's thick. It still cuts. It cuts reasonably well. It's actually still reasonably sharp. I have not used this a ton, but I have carried it a couple times. It feels like there might be a little bit of funkiness going on at the tip that I might have to touch up. But it's thick. It gets thick quickly. This is definitely a solid, sort of harder use knife, even though the rest of it doesn't necessarily say it in size. It definitely says it in appearance. It's sort of very tactical looking thing. Ah, yes, the comparison to the AA batteries, which I will remember eventually. Yeah, you have a lot more handle than that, than AA batteries, but honestly, you're pretty much falling in there pretty good. There's a lot of room on this thing. I can choke all the way back to here and still feel pretty locked in. This will fit in most hands, and it's super comfortable. The ergos are good. Even with this clip, it's such a low profile clip. They work. It's a little stiff on the clip, I gotta admit. It's not the easiest in and out of the pocket because of how stiff the clip is, but the clip does work. It's just got continuous rise. It's a good shape clip. It's comfortable in the hand. It's just a little stiff. That might, I mean, if I put it in and out of the pocket more often, that might actually adjust itself a little bit, but whatever. Alright, now that we're done with all the specs, we can really start talking more about this knife, even though I've already started talking more about this knife. I'm just sort of rambling on this one. ZT logo right there. I never like seeing it on the bevels. I would prefer to see it there, or just real small there. That, on the other hand, that I don't like. I don't like what ZT does when they stick all of that crap there. I don't need the serial number. I don't need the model number. CPM 20CV should be small and over there, and just 20CV probably. And the USA, okay, it's a Kai USA made knife for ZT. You can put that somewhere. That would be like the only thing that doesn't bother me. I'm just letting us know. All of that is just unnecessary billboarding. Yet, it still feels relatively minimal. Well, no it doesn't. Okay, I take it back. No it doesn't. Get rid of it. So, we've got I guess that's a curved, like, you'd call that a trailing clip point. I mean, is it a trailing clip point even if it's not higher than the spine itself? Yeah, I think if it comes back up a little bit, it's still technically considered a trailing clip point. It's a pretty old school blade shape. It's actually not that bad to get to the tip on this one, even though that can be an issue with them. This is functional. Thick, but functional. You've got jimping way up here that is pretty aggressive, yet not uncomfortable. Like, I mean, you really look at this thing and you think, wow, that's going to be horrible. It's not. It works really well. It'd probably work really well with gloves. Yeah, I don't know. You got the fuller that you've seen, can be used to reverse flick. I guess that's not a fuller. It's ground completely through. It's an opening hole. It's an aperture. You've got more holes in the blade. Tang, right behind the blade edge, or the bevel. Doesn't need to be there. Does it look kind of cool? Yeah, it does. I don't mind it. Got a flipper with very good jimping on the flipper. Stop pin's way up there, nowhere near the edge, which is good because the plunge grind is terrible. The plunge grind is sort of reaching the edge, but it also goes on an angle along with the rest of the knife. So you got sort of a plunge that goes this way. So you're definitely going to hit that. So you're definitely going to want to cut into that. Then again, I don't know how long or how far up this blade I'd want to go for use. Let's see. That is not that far up that blade. And we're at 30 thousandths. So you don't have a 10 tons of life on this thing. It's thicker, it's harder use. It's tactical. Who's using it for tactical things? Probably no one. Moving on to the titanium handle, which is finished very well. I mean, it may help that it's been anodized, but it's very comfortable, very smooth, you got some rounding here. It's very nice. It's very ergonomic, surprisingly so. You feel the clip just the tiniest bit. This rounded backspacer in G10 is very nice to interact with. It gives it a solidity. It's a surprisingly pleasant knife to just interact with, really. As I said, the clip is a little bit tight. Lock bar is not really going to be an issue because you're up on the G10, thankfully. This is I guess a frame lock on ball bearings, which is actually very smooth. There's no play, and we are almost perfectly centered. I think the grind favors the lock side just a tiny hint. Just at the tip, the grind's a little deeper on this side, so it goes over just a tiniest hint. But I think it's the grind. Everything else really, I mean, that's pretty darn close to being perfectly centered. So while this did come out in the era where Z2 wasn't necessarily doing what everybody wanted Z2 to do, this is a pretty cool knife. I like it. I like the design. I like the aesthetic. It is unfortunately discontinued. They were, hold on, I'll even look right now. They were, you know what? I don't know how much they were. No idea. I'll know if I find one that's still available. But this is sort of a fun knife that you could definitely get away with using in most regards. Maybe not the though it did cut and curl that paper pretty good. But as you can see, it's a little thicker. It's not the smoothest cut in existence. It wants to push. Though it will definitely slice. But again, it's not necessarily the most perfect slicer because of how thick it is. But it works. And it looks good doing it. And that's half of what we buy these knives for. And my word, does this flipper tab work well. This angle, you just push the thing and it fires out. So yeah, it's not the most complex of knife in materials, but construction, it's got a little extra going on here. And I can appreciate it. Lock bar insert that's attached way far down there. There is no internal milling for weight reduction. So that's where it's getting some of its weight, but again, for the size of knife, it's not that heavy. It feels solid. I just noticed that. The way that looks. I don't know what that is. Interesting. Oh, lock bar access is pretty good. It does stick out. You do have to kind of go at a little bit of an angle, but the chamfer kind of forces your hand to do it anyway. So it's not perfect lock bar access, but it's not hard, and it's an easy disengagement. Other than that, I think we have covered everything on this knife. Stop pins up there. Yeah. I feel like I'm forgetting something, and that's why I'm sort of delaying here, but I don't think I have. This is a cool knife. This is something I like. Won't be everybody's taste, but I do personally like it. And I guess that's all that matters because it's my knife. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.